everybody. Thank you for joining us for the May edition of our TEN Life Science meeting. My name is Shane. I run the events over at TEN Capital Network, and we have 5 amazing companies for you today in the life science category. So I want to bring up our CEO, Hall Martin, to get things started. But before he does that, just want to remind everybody in the audience to go ahead and put your questions in our chat box today for the session if you have any. And also don't forget to answer the poll at the end of each pitch. With that, I'm going to let Hall take it away.
Great, Shane. And I want to thank everybody for joining us today. We have 5 good companies to show you here in a moment. Each one will get 15 minutes to pitch and go through questions from the panelists. And then we hope to answer your questions in the audience as well. But first, let's meet our panelists today. First, we have Joseph Liu of CTAN. Joseph, can you tell us more about yourself and CTAN?
Hi, I'm a member of CTAN since 2015. I'm also a member of another 2 angel networks, TCA and Chemical Angels. So CTAN is a group. We each member invests individually. Collectively, we put about $475,000 in a round. And since last year, we started a fund, and the fund will invest in a deal when we have 4 members put $200K, and we would add another $140,000 to $150,000 into a deal. So this is our average check size. So the top 20 deals is about, we're industry agnostic, but we invest mostly in the life science in the past 3 years. The top 20 deals, we raised $2.9 million. So that leaves the majority of the deals around $300,000 to $350,000. And industry agnostic, medical device, pharmaceutical, diagnostic, therapeutic, we are open to all the deals.
Great. Thanks, Joseph. And also on the panel today is Michael Schmanske of MD Capital. Michael, can you tell us more about yourself and your firm?
Yes, thank you, Hall. So MD Capital essentially provides services to startups, but also we try to focus on the doctor as an investor, as an entrepreneur, as an advisor, as an evaluator of these companies. So if you are a healthcare professional and you're interested in working with startups or learning about them in any way, make sure you connect with Hall and connect with us. We have a lot of different opportunities with advisory services, but also doing company evaluations and other types of paid role services. So our goal is to try to make you take something which clearly interests you and engages you from a professional and investor level, or else you wouldn't be watching a video like this, and make you better at it or enable you to do more with it. So contact us via Hall if you have any interest. We also work via our media publication to promote startups as well. So connect with us as a startup also, please.
Great. Thanks, Michael. So let's bring up our first presenter, Endoshunt. Tyler, if you'd like to go ahead and share your screen and kick off when you're ready.
Absolutely. Thank you for having us, everyone. I'll just give me a thumbs up if everything's coming through okay on your side.
It's looking good now. Go ahead.
All right, perfect. So our goal today is to shed light on an unspoken pandemic that's robbing our young adults of their lives, our families of their loved ones, and our communities of their futures. This public health crisis is uncontrolled abdominal bleeding. And in the 10 minutes we've been given for this presentation, it'll unfortunately claim another 33 lives. My name is Tyler, and I'm the CEO of Endoshunt. We're developing a Class 2 medical device on a mission to end these preventable deaths by giving surgeons the gift of time so they can give patients the gift of life. The sad reality from a clinical perspective is that the time to death from abdominal hemorrhage or bleeding is often shorter than the time it takes to access the sites of these injuries once surgery begins, leaving our healthcare professionals helpless and our patients hopeless. Because of that, there's roughly 2 million deaths every single year worldwide from uncontrolled abdominal bleeding. And unfortunately, common causes are on the rise, including things like violent crimes, car accidents, or even complications during routine surgery. Even for those lucky enough to survive, 3 out of every 5 suffer from life-altering complications and nearly a year's worth of painful recovery due to the secondary trauma caused by today's current treatment alternatives. And over 500 healthcare discovery calls, this problem has rung true. Our industry is in desperate need of a solution, and Endoshunt is that solution. We empower surgeons with the ability to gain rapid, targeted control over abdominal bleeding. Our device is inserted through the femoral artery or vein, and then traced to the aorta or the IVC, where it can be deployed to occlude blood flow from the inside. EndoShunt's novel size adjustability helps surgeons make sure that their patient's blood is flowing to where it should and not out of where it shouldn't. And once the injury has been fixed, our device is completely removable and temporary in its application. To date, we have proven effective hemorrhage control in both simulation and animal testing models. In our simulations, our patients lost blood at a rate that would result in death in just over 2 minutes. But EndoShunt empowered these same surgeons with the ability to gain control over hemorrhage in 30 seconds and sustain that over the life of the experiment, buying them the time they need to effectively save lives in the future. While this is exciting, it's a whole nother challenge to show this in a living organism, but we've done exactly that. What we're looking at now is EndoShunt deployed in the IVC of a pig model. You can see our surgeon pointing to the shunt itself through a 1 centimeter laceration in this major blood vessel. An injury that would fill the abdominal cavity and blood in just seconds shows no active bleed. What's not seen in this video is our effective surgical repair of this injury and the removal of our device without causing any damage to the interior of the aorta or the IVC, showcasing safety and efficacy. This industry hasn't seen true innovation since World War II, and because of that, our patients and our providers are suffering. Market alternatives are simply not good enough. Packing is incredibly invasive. It requires a surgeon to open the patient and to race against time to find the site of the injury. It has limited clinical effectiveness and can even impair successful surgery. Cross-clamping or its less invasive counterpart, a balloon occlusion, goes upstream of the site of the injury and cuts off blood flow to the rest of the body. While this mitigates hemorrhage, it starts to starve our tissues of oxygen, and as little as 30 minutes can lead to damage as serious as amputation or organ failure. EndoShunt really is the only solution that gives our surgeons the time, the targeted control, and the techniques that they need to save lives and improve downstream health outcomes. But don't just take our word for it. Surgeons throughout the United States recognize the value that we will bring to this industry, calling our device a game changer, or saying they would use it tomorrow if it were available. And what we love to celebrate on this slide, these are not just any old trauma centers. These are industry leaders. Places like George Washington University, where the US president goes in the event of a trauma incident, or Shock Trauma Maryland, which spearheads international trauma innovation, are thrilled to partner with us in our future pilot launches. From an IP perspective, all of our patents are owned by EndoShunt, and we have filed for the category of temporary endovascular shunting, upon which we intend to build platform-level protections that'll help us capture the market for decades to come. In a perfect world, there would be no need for a device like EndoShunt, but this is not a perfect world. Leveraging the Trauma Quality Improvement Program dataset gives us granular detail into estimating our target markets. Our $366 million beachhead are exact injuries and severities where surgeons have said we are the best or the only solution. From here, we'll expand to all abdominal injuries of relevance in the United States, international trauma markets, and other therapeutic areas that expressed interest during customer discovery, giving us access to a nearly $60 billion annual opportunity. We'll capture this by launching first in trauma, where our expertise is deep and our connections to key opinion leaders is strong. We're pursuing our regulatory clearance with an estimated date in the second half of 25, which will be followed by a pilot launch and true commercialization in 2026 after the generation of real-world evidence. The revenue generated in trauma will fund the minimal R&D necessary for transplant and surgical oncology label expansions, and in the future, a second version of our device will be able to address OB/GYN needs as serious as postpartum hemorrhage. Our device carries with it a competitive price point while leaving us a healthy gross margin that any strategic would welcome into their portfolio in the futures. But for our trauma centers, we give access to nearly $26,000 of reimbursement on existing codes today, as well as access to nearly $4 billion of additional care opportunities every single year that they can't access simply because their patients aren't living long enough to receive them. We intend to go to market in the United States first and are already setting up this pathway today. We're building awareness through targeted outreach and the participation in trade shows, and are currently winning on-site clinical champions who will help us sell to value analysis committees in the future. Once we demonstrate clinical, financial, and operational impact, following procurement, we'll perform onboarding training and quarterly visits to make sure EndoShunt's product doesn't just end up on a trauma care shelf, but is used in a manner that helps these surgeons save lives and increase their facility's clinical outcomes. In greater detail, we estimate our break-even point at as early as 2026 on just 9 trauma centers. With the assumed growth rate of 1 trauma center per sales rep per month and maturity, we could generate revenues as high as $70 million in 2027 or over $100 million in 2028. They say you invest in a team first and a product second, but at EndoShunt, we are really lucky enough to have both. We've combined over 25 years of medical device development leadership at places like Medline and AbbVie Pharmaceuticals with catheter-based engineering expertise and 2 active trauma surgeons to ensure the device that we're developing is fit for our end users. And outside of our internal team, we boast an impressive network of medical device entrepreneurial and industry strategy support that help us identify opportunities and avoid risks that these professionals have experienced in their past. Aside from the business side of the coin, we have this same support from both scientific and clinical strategy perspectives that have opened numerous doors for us in respect to healthcare partnerships and governmental grant partnerships. But it's important to also recognize our areas of opportunity. We're partnering with the right EQMS to fit what the FDA wants to see for our future market access. Our regulatory consultants are the same exact organization responsible for our predicate devices clearance, giving us an insider's knowledge on how to repeat the same successes. Our manufacturing supply chain is all US-based and industry leaders in their respective materials. And as mentioned, we're partnering with the US Army and Air Force on R&D models to help make sure our device can be fit for the military population as well. We've come a long way since our ideation. On just $400,000, we've proven out our concepts through extensive customer discovery, the filing of our own IP, and demonstration of hemorrhage control in both simulation and animal models. We're currently raising a $2 million seed round to support our path through FDA clearance, and are happy to say that we're in due diligence for over $1 million of this round currently. In the future, we predict a $6 million Series A to support our pilot launch, our team expansion, and our path towards break-even and profitability. This raise is on a convertible note with an $8 million cap, a 25% conversion discount, 7.5% interest rate, and a 2-year maturity date. In respect to the use of funds, roughly 60% will go directly towards product development, finalizing our packaging, making the test materials we need for our regulatory testing pathway, and then performing said pathway. Roughly 26% will be set aside for the FDA clearance itself, including supplier qualifications and the submissions. And another 17% will be set aside for the team expansion into our COO and VP of Quality and Regulatory, as well as traveling and entertainment and legal consultancies. In the future, EndoShunt will give the gift of time to our trauma surgeons. And by helping us get this device to market, you can give the gift of life to their trauma patients. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Tyler. Let's bring up our investor panelists, Joseph and Michael. Joseph, what's your first question for today?
How do you compare to the predicates in terms of the performance and the price?
So the predicate device is Prytime Medical's ER Reboa Plus. It's a balloon occlusion device that is really meant to spike blood back to the heart in areas of low pressure. That's currently used for hemorrhage control simply because there's nothing better. We like to say we're a precision tool, whereas that is a nuke. It blows up and cuts off blood flow entirely, whereas we let blood flow just past the injury site. And in respect to
Michael,
price,
what's your first question?
Sorry, my internet I think is a little slow. In respect to price, they're sitting at
Go ahead, Tyler.
4,800,
Finish up. Sorry about that.
But we're currently priced at 6 based on a value-based pricing model that we've vetted through our customer discovery.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Michael, your first question?
Hey, Tyler. So trauma approval processes with the FDA can be notoriously difficult from testing and other things. Can you tell me a little bit about your plan to get through the approval process, which you are showing to market by 25? And then as a follow-up, maybe or even interleaved, or alternatively, given our time constraint, tell me more about this Defense Department interaction, any feedback you've received from them, and any opportunities you have for grant financing from them.
Yeah, phenomenal question. So right now, hopefully, my slide is still coming through. We're looking at our regulatory clearance pathway. So we are a Class 2 device because of our temporary application for less than 24 hours. So this is actually where we fall. And as Class 2, we really just have to show equivalency, safety, and efficacy to an on-market product, which is that Reboa product. So we've confirmed this testing as far as V&V, the product functions as intended from an engineer's perspective. And
you're sure you fall within that Class 2 issue because you are like emergency care, right? I mean, it's
yes, like, all of our predicates have
any emergency care is less than 24-hour application, right?
Unless it's a permanent stint that ends up getting chosen, but yes.
I mean, it's a trauma product as opposed to a surgical product. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Okay. Please.
But yes, we had a non-binding meeting with the FDA based on prize that we won at a recent competition. We're preparing for our actual binding meeting with the FDA. right before our manufacturing to formally confirm this testing plan, but the feedback was aligned to what we're seeing here. So it works as intended, doesn't hurt human tissues, which our materials have been on the market since 2004, so we don't see biocompatibility risk. And then we're running 2 pig models, one to show deployment without imaging, which is that blind deployment one, and then one for hemorrhage control and repair. We've already done both of those. So now we just have to do them with GLP measures and a lot bigger of a price tag on them.
Great. And when is that pre-submission meeting with the FDA?
We're loosely aiming for August.
Okay, thank you. Oh, and then the DoD question, sorry. Just
Yes.
what feedback you've received and what grant opportunities you have there.
We received incredible feedback from the DoD, BARDA as well. We actually just met with the congressman from Arkansas who heads the West Point Research and Development Medical Organization. And we have some really exciting opportunities, hopefully, to share on that front soon. But we already have formal partnerships with the Madigan Research Center for the Army and with a U.S. Air Force base out of UC Davis out on the West Coast. Those are already formal. And parallel grant funding for what we do is incredibly important and a major part of our strategy. I think everyone on here knows that there's an upcoming submission deadline. And if you don't, you might want to know about that. It's 2 weeks away. So we continually pursue those opportunities.
Joseph, do you have another question for us?
Yes. So do you change the way to locate the bleeding? Or you change the way to control the bleeding?
So what we're looking at now is really a very simplified process flow, and I'll show you the detailed one maybe offline if that makes sense. But the patient arrives, and you have 2 types of patients. Those with penetrative, who they're immediately going from ER to OR, and you have to get in there right away. And those maybe with blunt force, where you have more time for imaging. We can actually be used in both. So for those who are coding immediately upon entry, you deploy endoshunt in the aorta and the IVC. At full deployment, we're 20 centimeters, so we address all-cause abdominal hemorrhage. Once you get them to the OR, because you bought yourself that time, you then open them up, resize to just the occlusion zone you want, get rid of the product you didn't. If you have imaging time, we show up under imaging, so you could do this in the IR space with a little bit more control and less chaos. But either way, our big thing is buying these surgeons time and a cleaner operating environment so that they can hopefully lead to better patient outcomes.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I should have advanced. So we don't change the clinical process flow. We just add a third option that drastically decreases morbidity and mortality.
Thank you.
And it fits within the existing workflow of the environment.
Yes.
We're already doing a lot of these same procedures, correct?
I've been in healthcare product development for a decade. I've been a part of over 60 devices to international markets. Lesson 1 of actually developing something that's impactful is change nothing but the outcomes.
Great. Thanks, Tyler. Thanks, Joseph. Thanks, Michael. We'll now move on to our next presentation by Windmill. Lang, if you can go ahead and launch your slides, kick them ready.
Thank you, everyone.
Right.
Thanks, Tyler.
Thanks, Hall and TEN Capital for the opportunity to present on behalf of Windmill. I'm Sam Liang, a business advisor. I'm here along with Jeff Goheen, who's the director of engineering. And we're presenting on behalf of the CEO, Dr. Richard Smalling, who's busy seeing patients today. Windmill is developing a transformational LVAD, left ventricular assist device, that will improve and extend lives for end-stage heart failure patients. Next slide. The unmet need that we're addressing are the 6.5 million individuals with heart failure in the US, and it's costing the healthcare system over $30 billion a year. There's a subset of these patients, about 50,000 of them, that are categorized as end-stage heart failure. It's about a $6.5 billion TAM. And basically, this patient population is either seeking a heart transplant or this device called an LVAD. Unfortunately, as you'll see down to the bottom, at the bottom of the slide, due to the lack of hearts and deficiency in the only LVAD technology that's available today, less than 10% of patients get an LVAD. That leaves well over 40,000 patients with a poor quality of life. And the primary reason why LVADs have limited adoption, it's because the only product that's available on the market today is the Abbott HeartMate 3. And this technology is based upon a continuous flow pump. So if you see, it's basically an impeller-based design. Think of a blender that's constantly rotating at 3,000 to 5,000 RPMs that pulls blood through the system. This technology, unfortunately, damages the blood and it degrades this factor in the blood called von Willebrand factor. It's been highly correlated in numerous scientific papers that when you damage the von Willebrand factor, it sets off a cascade of downstream events and result in about a third of the patients having a high rate of major adverse events, whether it's stroke, GI bleeding, and infection. In addition to that, when you add it all together, a majority of these patients, over 90%, end up being rehospitalized. So it'd be very meaningful to patients and reduce the cost burden in the healthcare system if we can develop a better LVAD. Next slide, please. So the solution that Windmill has developed, it's called the TORVAD. It's an LVAD that essentially simulates the human heart. The technology consists of two ceramic pistons enclosed in a titanium casing that pumps in a pulsatile fashion, just like your heart, in synchrony with the patient's activity. There are algorithms inside that sense the heart rate, pressure, and other factors that either speed up or slow down the pump. So if the patient's walking fast, it ends up speeding up. If the patient's sitting down, then it slows down, just like the human heart. There's been extensive animal testing to demonstrate that TORVAD does not damage the blood. In the middle here, you'll see that recent testing that compares HeartMate 3 with TORVAD. As you increase the pump speed of the HeartMate 3 in red, you'll see the damage that's occurring to the von Willebrand factor. And the final comments I'll make on the far right, because the TORVAD is pumping synchronously and it's not on continuously, it draws less power. So the system requirements are much smaller. You can see here that it's about, on the left here in this document, that it's about a third of the size and weight than the current HeartMate 3 by Abbott, which will make it much more patient-friendly. And the end result, we believe, will give you improved outcomes through the reduction of adverse events and improved patient and physician adoption. One last thing on the physician adoption, because of the size of the TORVAD system, the physician can actually implant the device through a thoracotomy as opposed to the sternotomy. So in the sternotomy, the surgeon will have to crack the chest completely open. In a thoracotomy, they're able to actually go through a less invasive way through the ribs and implant the device. Another reason for advanced physician adoption. Let's go to the next slide, please. So what you see here is a video clip comparing the two systems side by side. The TORVAD is on the right side, and you can see it's pumping in a pulsatile fashion, just like your own heart. And if you can see on the monitor, the heart rate, which is at the top, it'll go up and go down from 70 to 80 to 90 to 100, and then all the way back down. And you'll note that as the heart rate is going up or going down, the pump rate of the TORVAD pumps faster and increases the blood rate through the flow of your body. And as the heart rate continues to go down, you'll see the column also slow down and the column will be at a lower level. So all of this is occurring because you can see a lead that is going from the device all the way to the heart. This is a smart pump. So this lead senses all of the factors that I mentioned before. So as the activity increases, so you're playing with your kids, TORVAD senses it, begins to pump faster, and it pumps more blood flow through your body. Conversely, if you slow down and you lay down, the heart rate slows down and the TORVAD slows down. Now on the left-hand side, I want to draw your attention to the HeartMate 3. So besides the very large size of the whole system, it's about 6 pounds compared to 1.5 pounds of the TORVAD. Notice that there's no lead to the heart. So as the pump continuously pumps, you see the flow rate at the exact same level. So in this situation, if the patient were to spend more time in activity, becoming more active, it's been known that the patient would get dizzy or lightheaded. And conversely, if the patient lay down, the HeartMate potentially overpumps and the patient feels constant pressure on the head and body. And the very last thing I'll point out is the gentleness of the pumping. On the right-hand side, you see the TORVAD pumping these Orbi beads that are completely intact. If you place those Orbi beads, which we've shown here on the left, through the continuous flow HeartMate, you'll see that it's actually chewed up. And this is to demonstrate the damage that can occur to the von Willebrand factor. So if you go to the next slide, please, in summary, basically, if you look at Torvad, because it's pulsatile, it's gentle, it should give improved outcomes, it's responsive to the patient activity, and it's a very small system leading to more patient satisfaction and an improved implant technique from the surgeon. Conversely, when you look at HeartMate 3, which is the current standard of care of market, it has current documented adverse events, it's non-responsive, and today only has less than a 10% penetration rate, showing the low patient acceptance. If you go to the next slide, please. What the company has actually achieved, tremendous amount of progress. There's 3 generations of products that are actually designed. There's filed patents. There's over 50 animals and cadavers studied already. The device has been presented and published in a number of world-class publications as well as congresses. The company has assigned a world-class advisory board, and support for the device was validated at the American College of Cardiology in 2022 by winning the pitch challenge. Next slide. As I mentioned before, the current TAM in the US alone is over $6.4 billion, but the annual realized revenue that Abbott realizes today through the HeartMate 3 is over $1.1 billion, with 600 million of that in the United States with very healthy reimbursement. We've done a lot of voice of customer interviews, and with Torvad, these thought leaders believe that Torvad would become their primary first-line use device, and it would greatly expand their utilization of the product because of all of the said benefits and value proposition. We have timelines that would show commercialization of the product in the 2030 timeframe, and easily this could be a $1 billion plus revenue line for any strategic that would take on, or the company if it were to be as a standalone. Next slide. The company is currently raising $7 million. It is to hire a full-time experienced CEO. Dr. Smalling is a practicing, a world-renowned interventional cardiologist in structural heart, and he needs to turn over the reins to a full-time experienced CEO. We want to engage regulatory consultants, both MICRA as well as contract manufacturer Valentium. MICRA has a consultant that used to sit on the FDA panel approving these devices. He's currently advising Windmill, and Valentium is based in Houston and has experience manufacturing implantable electronic devices of this complexity. And the use of the funds is contracting with both of these firms to finalize the product design and to develop the first-in-human EFS protocol. I would just make one final comment that the exits in this market have been very large, in the multi-billion dollars, with Abbott acquiring Thoratec for $3.3 billion and Medtronic acquiring Heartware for over $1 billion. From an exit dynamic perspective, multiple strategics are interested in heart failure and treating the continuum of heart failure. And so we believe that there is a viability in many of these strategics that have a commercial footprint in the space. An IPO is also a possibility with this type of company. Next slide, please. I'll just close. Final words is that, as I mentioned before, if you interview and speak to any heart failure specialist in this space, they would all pretty much validate the fact that with this pump, it would actually become their first line therapy, as well as expand utilization in their current patient base. Next slide. Thank you very much for your time. And if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them now, or please feel free to reach out to myself, Jeff, or Dr. Smalling accordingly. Thank you. Great.
Thanks, Sam. Joseph, what's your first question?
Is it PMA or Class 2? And is it de novo or predicate?
It is a full IDE PMA device.
So compared to the LVAD, are you improving this through mechanics, to design, and what's your defensibility compared to the competition to the traditional LFAT when they improve their design?
Yeah, so I'll answer that a couple different ways. Number one, the HeartMate 3 has been out there close to a decade. And Abbott, certainly as the monopoly, the only player in there, has not advanced any material improvement in the design. They're simply milking this product line, showing the unmet need. When you look at the ability for the product to pulse, sense, and pump blood like your heart does, we would believe very much that the adverse event rate of 30% plus in this patient population could be reduced to half at a minimum, and potentially even lower from an overall advantage, which would save quite a bit of money for the healthcare system. And that would be, when I say it's not really a predicate device because it's not a 510K, but the clinical trial would basically contemplate a direct comparison. It would be a trial of the HeartMate 3 versus the Torvad design. That would be the trial that would be contemplated. That is contemplated in the plan.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Great.
Joseph.
And Michael, what's your first question? I see you posted one in the chat box.
Yeah, quickly, on each heartbeat or heart pulse, right? How many spins of those little things are there? More than one, I'm guessing?
I believe it's one. So with each cycle, it's one pulse of blood, approximately 30 cc's of blood in there. And then Jeff, I think you can make a comment on there, the technical engineering piece.
Yeah, that's right. It's one rotation.
Only
per
one rotation is one heart
So-
compression.
So the RPMs of the pump are equal to the heart rate. So if the heart rate's 90, the RPM is 90.
How do you get enough volume? Like, it just seems geometrically impossible to get the same volume out of a torus as you're getting out of a slice of a hemisphere, like out of a hemisphere.
Yeah, it's the size of the torus is sized so that it's a 30 milliliter ejection. And so the heart contracts during systole, ejects some flow through the aortic valve.
Okay.
And then the Torvad pumps in diastole when the heart's resting, adding cardiac
No,
output.
so the load and unload are actually matching the pressure dynamics of the heart. So it's actually
Yeah.
sucking in from the side and pushing out with the systolic and diastolic motion.
That's right.
Very nice. Okay. Why don't existing pumps just pulse in terms of their speed, like they're hitting a Vitamix blender on pulse, you know, like that,
Yeah.
to match like the problem of like upping, you know, activity levels?
Right. They've tried to. The problem is you can't speed down and slow down and speed up an impeller fast enough to create pulsatility. And if you try to, it creates a lot of excess power. So the continuous flow devices.
You would have to break it, which would then create lossage. You get overheating as well at that point.
Yes, overheating, blood damage, excess power, all those, yeah, would happen.
Understood. Okay,
Yeah.
very cool.
If you
Very cool technology.
if you pulse at a very high speed, Michael, then you get the blood damage that's occurred.
That too.
So in
That's why
addition
in my
to
head I'm thinking
all
of
that.
Vitamix blender. Like, that sounds like an awful idea, like at very high speeds with high impeller rates. And then, but of course, in order to fix that, you got to drop the impeller speed itself, but that increases the mass, which then gets into your heating problem.
Yes.
I get it, makes the engineer in my heart sing. But like, getting to the finance guy in me, talk to me more about the timeline to market here, because you did a lot of hand waving on like what the approvals are and like why you don't think you need to be 510K and why you still think a predicate device
Wow.
occurs. Like, talk to me about why you feel you have confidence that you can get to market, because it seems, you know, what's out there.
Yeah. So pretty much every device that's out there is some derivation, or any other company chasing the space, Michael, is some derivation of a continuous flow device. There is one other French company that is it's not pulsatile per se, and it's also not continuous flow. It's got a vibrating, oscillating membrane that's pushing blood through. So this is the only device that actually has the sensing capability with the epicardial lead that can simulate the human heart. That's number one. Overall timelines at the highest level is with funding of the $7 million. It will finalize the design It'll take another 13 million to complete the first in human EFS in the 2026 timeframe. And then post 2026, with success in that area, you would do a pivotal, which would be about 2 years, which would give you the pivotal IDE PMA device that would give you approval in that 2030 timeframe for commercial launch in that 2030 to 2031 timeframe. And these devices have been already regulated and categorized by the FDA as a PMA device. So that we know. And then from an exit perspective, post EFS, a strategic would pick it up. I think I work as an operating partner at a firm called Revival. We have a build to buy strategy that could fund this. And then with successful EFS, first in human, this is an IPO-able type of company just to raise money for that US pivotal. That could happen too, as far as the exit opportunity.
Mike, bring on a new panelist here. Uli, thanks for joining us. Can you do a quick intro to yourself and ask a short question as we're near the end of this time on this one?
Sure. My name is Uli Cheripalli. I'm a physician, an entrepreneur, and an innovator. I run AngelMD, which is a group that teaches physicians entrepreneurship and innovation. I'm also a startup founder, Serica Therapeutics, which is building a digital therapeutic for autism. My question is, now you're trying to replace what the standard of care is, right? The standard device. Now, is there a possibility that you can actually increase the market size?
Yes, we've had feedback from all the thought leaders that if we're able to reduce the clinical event rate, they would actually apply it to a greater patient population. The second piece is the ability to place this in a less invasive way. It would open up the number of patients that are not real good surgical candidates for doing a sternotomy. Again, thirdly, because the device is a lot smaller, you have the ability from a patient perspective. Many patients, they look at the 6 pounds they have to wear every day, and they would say, I don't want to do it. So from a patient satisfaction, we think the patient adoption rate would be higher. More patients would opt for using an LVAD on those 3 dimensions. So thank you. Great question.
Great.
So
Thanks so much, Sam.
Yep.
We're out of time
Thank
on
you.
this one, but we'll have 3 more. So appreciate that. We'll bring up our next presenter, Senzo, Jeremy Sakowitz. If Jeremy, you could launch your slides and kick off when ready.
Sounds good. Thanks, Hall. Let me pull up the slides here.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Sounds good. Firstly, thank you to everyone for your time today and attention, and very excited to be here to talk about Senzo. So we're an in vitro diagnostics company, and at the end of the day, we believe there's a better way to do diagnostics, particularly outpatient diagnostics, and that leads to better healthcare outcomes, happier patients and participants in the system, happier stakeholders, and lower cost. And the way to deliver that is our novel proprietary platform, a lateral flow platform called Amplified Lateral Flow ALF. And I'll be talking to you more about that. Firstly, the team. So our 2 founders in the middle there, Aaron and Yuba, out of Cambridge, PhDs, brilliant R&D scientists, product development scientists on the biochemistry and engineering front. Lester is helping us on the quality and regulatory side, making sure we're doing everything as we move from R&D phase into clinical phase, and then all of the FDA work, CE mark work, UK work. I have 25 years within life sciences, 15 plus of that with diagnostics. Started with ortho clinical diagnostics when I was with Johnson & Johnson, and then spent 12 years at a company called Quotient, basically taking that company, which was a spin out of the NHS, and at a similar state that Senzo is today, from no revenue to 40 million, and through venture, private equity, and an IPO on NASDAQ, and about 80 products brought through FDA, full commercial structure in the US. So I was really excited when I came across Senzo. I joined as CEO 3 years ago. The company's been around for about 5 years. So ultimately, we believe there's a better way to do this, right? Diagnostics is kind of the tip of the spear. It sometimes is the reason people never enter the healthcare system, or they don't enter correctly or fast enough. The pandemic showed us that people and the healthcare system is receptive to home testing or point of care testing. And so everything is set up here for much broader adoption of home testing as well as low-tech point of care testing. We're not waiting for something to happen externally for payers or healthcare providers to be willing to do this, or even FDA. The limitation is squarely on technology. We've not had a technology that was good enough to be a test of record, FDA-approved test that can be used at home or in pharmacies, primary care doc settings, school nurse, right? And that's what ALF brings. And we see that as the holy grail of really combining accuracy, low cost, and accessibility and speed. So that's, think of ALF, I'll show it to you here. Looks very much like lateral flow we all came to know and love during the pandemic. So very simple to use. A 10-year-old can use it. 10-minute time to result, long shelf life, room temperature storage. We can make this product for under $2. There is a glut of excess high quality manufacturing of lateral flow on the back of diminished needs coming out of the pandemic. And so very easy to manufacture, high quality, low cost. What's missing with traditional lateral flow technology is performance. And what ALF provides through amplification and a novel mechanism of action within this little test is the ability to have central lab PCR-like accuracy, particularly sensitivity. And so we have a partnership with a group called Primary Health as well, that patients, they don't need to use any sort of tech along with this. There's no hardware, but you can scan a QR code with your phone, and that will take you to instructions for use. It'll create a test record should you want to pass that on to your physician. But importantly, it opens up the test to treat model where it can take you to a teledoc. That doctor says, hey, you bought this at CVS. That's great. This is a great FDA test. Yep, unfortunately, you're positive for the flu. Here's a prescription for Tamiflu. Go pick it up, and your kid, you can be on an antiviral within an hour of waking up and not feeling good, as opposed to today when almost nobody accesses those. Another way to look at this is the WHO criteria for assured. The vast majority of tests in this country that are outpatient happen via LabCorp and Quest and our central lab tests, but even point of care tests are not necessarily affordable, user-friendly, or inexpensive. And ALF's really the only one that checks all of these boxes. It also allows us to enter developing world countries where you have things like tuberculosis. This is a perfect technology for that, or DARPA defense frontline applications where you can have a couple of hundred of these in the back of a pickup truck. The main use, and I think that gets to this slide, is for infectious disease human testing. But as you can see here, this is a platform, right? Importantly, we're also able to multiplex. So sometimes you don't know what test to buy because you don't know what you have. So we're creating tests that have...
What the technology is that you're actually doing?
Yes, so that's this. So it's quite simple, as you might imagine, with a $2 test that looks like a lateral flow. The difference is we have an amplification step. There's nothing molecular here. This is all old school immunoassay ELISA. And essentially we create a barrier, a physical barrier, a dam, if you will, when there's a positive sample present between the target. Usually you have an antibody targeting antigen, virus, bacteria, fungus. That barrier is formed. It traps the HRP enzyme here. We add the substrate amplification, and that lights up as a bright blue signal to the user. In the case of a negative sample, there is no dam, there's no physical barrier, the HRP rolls off the test.
Is this customizable to the degree of like inputting a different strip cartridge kind of thing?
Each test would be manufactured for a given use. So you would do your R&D focused on Hep C, because you'd have a specific antibody. You would then take that through your clinical trial. It would be approved and manufactured and packaged as such. So each test would be sold as a single use cheaply, right? $10, $15 retail for a given indication. Mostly you need to optimize buffers and other things, but mostly you're switching out which antibody targets Hep C versus flu versus gonorrhea.
Is this repurposing technology you guys kind of developed around COVID and around the pandemic, utilizing it for other purposes, or what's going on here?
Well, the company was founded on exactly this, a better way to do ELISA immunoassay testing through amplification. During the pandemic, we looked at all of the not very good lateral flow tests and said there's got to be a better way. And so that was the drive for coming up with this invention. We were pretty surprised that no one had come up with this and that we had freedom to operate and the ability to generate IP here. So in that sense, COVID was the challenge that led us to this invention. But ultimately, it is, a platform that can be directed against many other
now I'm ready to see this. Sorry to interrupt that whole cycle there, Jeremy, but now I'm ready to see this part of the slide.
Yeah, great.
Continue.
So again, we've shown proof of principle in sample types: nasal swabs for respiratory, mouth swabs, urine for tuberculosis, finger prick whole blood for things like HIV. Mostly we've been targeting antigen, but you can lay down antigen to find antibody. For instance, for HIV 1-2 antibody, we've used water as a sample. So again, this could be used for environmental, chemical, bioterrorism testing, small animal, livestock, veterinarian, even in-process QC testing for gene therapy, cell therapy manufacturing. So very flexible. Development is fast. It's a couple of months to target a new indication, and very straightforward from a regulatory standpoint. It's a 510(k) path with a comparison to predicate of central lab testing and your concordance with that testing. Mostly for most of these, we think you would benefit from the ability to do home testing. So then usability becomes part of that trial as well. But it's very straightforward. In some cases, like a hospital admission screen or a differential test of viral versus bacterial to decide whether you prescribe antibiotics while you're further investigating, those would be professional use tests, not home use tests. But the technology remains the same, and this can be done rather than through a retail purchase. This could be part of a reimbursement.
What sample size do you need? I see you can multiplex here from a single sample. What sample size are you using?
Very small. So nasal swab, in that case for a respiratory panel, you'd have a nasal swab. It's exactly like we all use for COVID, into a small buffer volume of 1 ml and then squeezed onto the test.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sorry, I'm kind of monopolizing here, and I apologize, but I do have a lot of questions around the IP of this. We can take that offline, but very quickly on that,
I'm getting to it.
I'll revert to the rest of everybody else. So the amplification process is your secret sauce, is really what we're getting down to. So can you talk a little bit more about that, or maybe I'm getting the message wrong?
So the IP is around the entire process. So amplification is a part of that. Amplification in lateral flow is not new particularly, although there are very few commercialized tests that use that. IDEX has a veterinarian test, SNAP, that uses amplification. I think it's amplification along with the creation of a physical dam barrier. And doing that is you're using pretty different setups in your nitrocellulose. You're blocking how you adhere antibodies. It's not a sandwich assay with antibody. It's a single capture antibody. So there are a lot of things that are unique and different, even though it kind of looks like a regular lateral flow at kind of 10,000 feet. But I can take you through the IP in a second if you want.
We'll take that offline. I want to, I want to reserve some time at least for the other panelists. Sorry, guys.
As you might imagine, it's a very large market. We'll leave it at that. Any one of these applications is multi-billion in possibility, and certainly the top 6 add up to greater than 60 billion. We have demonstrated proof of principle here in third-party testing and have nearly 100% concordance to gold standard, including, and importantly, ultra low levels of virus present where current lateral flow would be 0 for 36 on those positives. We found 35 out of 36. So this identifies disease earlier in some cases. In many cases, people have symptoms and are infected and can transmit, but just have very low bacterial or viral loads. This, if you can find it with PCR, you can find it with ALF. IP, we can take this offline, but at a high level, we own all of it. So none of this came out of university or anything else. We have a full freedom to operate written analysis from a very well-known law firm, Wolf Greenfield, and we are very close to getting our US patent granted. It's been in examination since November, December of last year. And we have agreement on novel reducible to practice. We're just working on final claims to be granted. Importantly here, business plan. Would love to have 30 Senzo tests lining the shelves of every Walgreens in the Western Hemisphere, but that would take a lot of time and a lot of money. We think a much more prudent path for investors is teaming up with the big guys, especially in the beginning, for credibility and accessing their deep pockets and commercial reach. And so we are in active discussions with companies you see here, such as Abbott, Roche, Becton Dickinson, as well as some therapeutic providers who see the value in more testing reaching the 1 million undiagnosed Hep C patients. For example, if you're selling a Hep C treatment, driving a low-cost diagnostic makes a lot of sense. So the idea here is Roche picks the indication they want. Hey, they want a strep test. They pay for the R&D work, the clinical regulatory work, and then they have a license to sell. We collect milestones along the way upfront, as well as a royalty on the back end of sales. And we are deep in conversations with these groups. I know I'm running out of time. And now my screen is frozen.
Just go to the fundraise ask and jump to a few questions.
Fundraising, guys. So we are raising a bridge seed 4 round of 3 to 4 million. 1.8 has already been raised. We'd like to raise the additional 1.2 to 2.2 by the end of Q2 or Q3 of this year. And then we envision that will take us through signing up a couple of these business development partners, doing a Q1 Series A, and I believe that'll be our last raise, as this has an obvious path to an M&A exit from one of those development partners in less than 3 years. And I'll leave it at that.
Great, thanks. Willie, what's your first question?
Quick question. Are you going to use the existing CPT code?
So we certainly can. And again, our commercial partners who will have, are very used to bringing new products and accessing reimbursement will help with that. We can use existing codes. Often that's reimbursing for a $125 PCR test, and this would be far cheaper. But remember, a lot of this will be retail over the counter, so there's no reimbursement. Patients are paying out of pocket, but a lot of research shows $15 at Walgreens, right, is far less than your copay of visiting your primary care doc and running a LabCorp test.
Thank you.
So that was the question. You're bypassing the insurance system and going directly to consumers, correct?
It's a combination. So yes, correct.
Or
there will be a lot of
like institutional purchasing, like World
Right.
Health.
There will be local, state government buyers. There will be institutional purchasers. You can do it retail. In some cases, we would want a reimbursement code, but the majority of the business would be out with that.
Got it.
Cool. All right, great, guys. Thanks for a great presentation, Jeremy. With that, let's move to our next presenter. We have with us next Scott Cato of Balance Pharma.
Hi, I'm Scott Cato. I'm the CEO at Balance Pharma. We're making anesthetics better for dentists and patients. So dental injections, as everybody or almost everybody knows, are painful, slow acting, and unreliable. The main reason for that is that dental anesthetics have to be stored in an acid environment so that they will have an adequate shelf life. There's some bad things that happen. Again, the pain, the slow action, and the unreliability that are related to that acid. And currently, there's no way to have an anesthetic that doesn't have that acid in it. So next slide. As you might have guessed, I'm here to tell you about an anesthetic that doesn't have the acid. We have granted patents and pending patents that that cover our ability to remove that acid at the very last minute before it's injected, so that the patient has a less painful, faster acting, and more reliable shot. Next slide. We know that all this works because there's been a lot of studies done before we even got started. We knew what the problem was in terms of the acid. The scientific community knew this. They did all these tests and they took the acid out and said, you know, hey, what happens? And we know that good things happen. What they weren't able to do was do it all in a small dental cartridge, which dentists like to use and pretty much have to use. And so that's sort of the magic bullet that we came up with, was being able to remove that acid without having the dentist have to change anything that she's doing when she's given that shot. Go ahead, next slide. This is just a little diagram. It just shows, you know, kind of exactly how we did it. If you look to the left side of the screen, you see the standard cartridge over there and a blow up of it, and you see how the needle, the back side of the needle, pokes into that cartridge, and then you can pump the anesthetic into the tissue through that fluid path. If you look over on the right side, you see how ours works, and we've just changed the end of it so that when the needle goes up there, it pops a little cap out, and it lets that liquid mix with a little bit of sodium bicarbonate powder. And so that's how we get that neutralized solution that works so well. Next slide. We got a really strong reaction from dentists and key opinion leaders. We went out and asked 614 dentists across the US and Europe and said, hey, what do you think about this? And they loved it, to make a story short. We also asked some of the major key opinion leaders in dentistry, including textbook authors and people who have been studying dental anesthetic for decades. And they said all these wonderful things about our product. So next step is, you know, getting FDA to tell us, you know, what do you need to do to get this thing on the market? And we went and had a couple meetings with FDA. We're probably going to have to, you know, have at least one more to completely finalize the exact details of our program. But we know that it's going to be a short program. We suspect it's just going to be one visit, you know, maybe 100 healthy patients or less, and maybe a couple of animals. So we don't think it's going to take very long or cost very much money, and we sort of know the outcome. The only real reason we're doing these tests is so that we can get superiority claims on our label. Next slide. And this is sort of complicated and long time to explain sort of slide, but you see some features over there on the left side, and then you see that really our product is the only one that gives you all the things that you want in terms of a yes rather than a no. Go ahead, next slide. It's a really big market. There's 744 million units sold in affluent markets in North America, Europe, and parts of Asia at the moment. Our studies, you know, that we did look like we can take at least 35% of that market and probably make about a little over $2 per cartridge on every one we sell. So it's a nice big market, and we've got a really long patent life, probably going to extend into the second quarter of 2045. So we're going to get, you know, nearly 20 years actually on the shelf, which is nice. Go ahead, next slide. This just shows how we make money. Again, we talked about we can sell this stuff for about $3 wholesale. make it for less than $1 a unit and keep $2. Distributors are going to love us because they're going to make quite a bit more money on our product than they would on the current standard of care product. And dentists are going to love us because we're going to make them a lot more money by saving them time and making them heroes with their patients. Next slide. This is just one of those slides where we talk about how much money we think we can make. They're always wrong, but it's good to have one that tells you what what your best guess is. So that's our slide, and the beauty of this is even if we miss it by a whole lot, we are still pretty much printing money for the next 20 years, and especially in comparison to the less than $50 million total raise that we need to get this thing to market. It's many, many billions of dollars in even in net present value. Okay, next one. How am I doing on time, Hall? Anybody know? Am I okay?
You have 8 minutes left with,
Okay.
for Q&A. So maybe two minutes for pitch, and then we'll go to Q&A.
Okay. So this is just a slide that shows we thought a little bit about how long it takes to get to market. And the answer is a little less than 3 years if we do everything right, a little more than 3 years if we don't. Again, it's not quite $50 million in total cash burn that we're going to need. But again, when you compare that with the profit potential, it's a very small amount of money. Next slide. I could brag for days on this team, so I won't even start. I'm the ugly guy out there in the upper left, but everybody else is just top notch. Next one. Here again, wonderful scientific people that we have here, all are respected in their fields and across multi-specialties. Jason will tell you, I'm not too bright, but I make up for it by hiring all these really smart people. So it's a real privilege and pleasure to work with all of them. And these folks here are all volunteers. We've got about 100, and that's because that's about how many we ask. And some of them, like Art DeMarco there, the third from the left, he's a textbook author, as is Kathy Bassett, on the subject of anesthesia. Anyway, just lots of wonderful people that have volunteered because they love the product. Current raise, just a $500,000 safe. It's just kind of a bridge round. So it's a 20% discount. And we've got an upcoming $6 million Series A, which gets us started on that program we talked about a minute ago. I'm happy to talk to anybody that wants to give me a phone call. Pretty easy to find. This is my 60 or 70 hour a week job. So always glad to stop working for a minute and talk to somebody.
Great, Scott. Thanks. Great presentation. Joseph, what's your first question?
The design is a new cartridge, right? Why do you focus on the dentist industry, not other use?
It's a great question. We have some patents pending around a vial presentation, but the size of the dental market is just enormous. Even when you add up like derm and plastics and interventional radiology and podiatry and urology, everybody that's sticking skin, we dwarf all of them put together.
Do you plan to expand the roadmap to different use?
Yes, sir. Yeah, I mean, definitely the first two products are dental products. Those are, the flagship product, but yeah, we've got actually quite a bit of uses for this platform, including steroids and opioid substitutes and maybe some military things, and then definitely the derm plastics emergency use.
Even with the same design of the device, for each use, you probably need to submit a new indication, right? Or can you speed up when you have the new different use? Or do you have to go through the new indication, IND and NDA?
Yeah, well, I mean, we'll definitely have to submit some more data, for derm and plastic, but there is such ubiquitous use by derms, for instance, that are out in the clinics that this is a really easy 505(b)(2) and maybe even a J, to be honest with you. We could do this as a J for dental, but we wanted those claims. That's why we're a B2.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thanks,
sir.
Joseph. Uli, what's your question?
You were talking about faster onset of action. How does that happen? I understand the decrease in pain.
Yeah, the faster onset is because the actual drug that hits the target has to be at a neutral pH before you get very much of the drug. You actually get about 30% of the drug available even after you get it to body pH. But at the pH that it's stored at, it's like not even 1%.
Got it.
Thanks. Michael, what's your question?
Yeah. So do your patents cover non-sodium bicarbonate as well? Because if we're looking at other particle mixing, like there are other uses beyond just pH matching, right?
Yeah, our patents cover an elegant way to mix things together in a dental cartridge or a medical vial. And so that's what they cover.
That's what I'm thinking, because people have known that sodium bicarbonate would neutralize the acid that was packing. It was just the delivery platform that you've really innovated here. And it seems that the delivery platform is usable in things other than baking soda.
Absolutely. Yep, sure is.
Okay. What is your, kind of like asking a college grad, what your biggest weakness is, but what is your single greatest hurdle that you're trying to assess, other than funding, which is obviously everybody's biggest? What is the fail mode? Like, what is the point where you say that's the thing that's going to be the determining factor that we win or lose on that hill?
Well, I can tell you what it won't be. It won't be FDA, which everybody worries about with a drug. We're essentially removing something from a known drug that's been given billions and billions of times. So from a strictly will this harm anybody and will it work, we know that. So FDA is not a problem. CMC is always a problem for any drug. Doesn't matter how long you've been making it or whether you're just starting to make it. That's a constant ongoing quality problem.
The viewers CMC.
Excuse me?
For everybody else, CMC.
No, I just said CMC is
right. But what is CMC? The manufacturing process, right?
Yeah. Chemistry, manufacturing, controls is sorry. I
know you dropped
an acronym in there. I apologize, but yeah, making a drug is something that you have to do and do exactly right, especially if it's an injectable drug. And so that's a constant ongoing risk for any company. I don't care if you're, Pfizer or Moderna or whoever, that's a risk. And so it's a risk for us. But it's a manageable risk, and it's not a risk that, every pharma doesn't have, right?
So what is the risk?
That's probably the biggest one, honestly.
Is manufacturing process?
Yeah, and it's not really. Like I said, it's not, but it is, but it isn't, right? I mean,
that seems like a lot of work, but it seems controllable, right?
Right. I mean, it's the same risk that every pharma company has. So, and there's how many drugs in Walgreens. So, somebody's able to do it, and we will too.
All right. Great, guys. Great questions. Let's move to our final presenter. We have with us today Bexion. Scott, if you could launch your slides and show them as well.
Pleasure to be with you, and thanks to Hall and the whole team at TEN for arranging. So our company is a very unique biotech company, unique in many ways, but one of the ways that we're unique is we're actually Midwest based. We're based in the general Cincinnati, Ohio area, actually in Covington, Kentucky, which is just across the river, as they say there. And there's some pretty interesting history as to why we're located there. We are focused on developing a novel first-in-class biotech for our biologic therapy for solid tumor cancers and for neurologic conditions, specifically initially chemotherapy-induced peripheral neuropathy. And we are well into the clinic, which is unusual for a lot of biotechs, in that we're in phase 2, with our lead program being metastatic colorectal trial for our product. So pretty far along through the clinic. The kind of anecdote about why we're in the greater Cincinnati area is that the company is actually a spin out a number of years ago from Cincinnati Children's Hospital, which is actually the leading pediatric hospital in America. Actually, it's been rated more highly than Boston Children's, for example. And also has a very prolific academic research group from which the original IP and product was licensed to start the company. And the original seed money came from the state of Kentucky, who was trying to build an incubator space, wet lab space, and attract tech to come there. And indeed they have. And nowadays, believe it or not, the greater Cincinnati area and northern Kentucky has become one of the epicenters for tech and biotech and incubators for a lot of different startup companies. And it's in the Midwest. It's not in Cambridge and it's not in California. So a pretty interesting story in that regard. So what we're doing at Bexion is we have as I said, a first-in-class, very, very novel biologic. That is it's manufactured through a recombinant DNA process that has shown great activity against solid tumor cancers of multiple types. And a little bit surprisingly to us when this first came up, also has activity against nerve cell damage in the periphery caused by chemotherapy and potentially by other things such as diabetes. So it's a twofold approach that we're taking with the pipeline and the product. Solid tumor cancers and peripheral neuropathy, initially chemo-induced peripheral neuropathy. As I mentioned, we are well along in the clinic. We actually have 3 clinical trials ongoing. The lead program is a phase 1b/2 metastatic colorectal cancer study. And we just have received a couple of rounds of data readouts on that. And I've actually taken the liberty of plugging a couple of slides into the deck to share with you on that. So it's very exciting. The data is it's actually looking very encouraging, we feel. And we also have a second study underway and about 2/3 of the way enrolled and moving very nicely in looking at the ability of the drug to reverse existing peripheral neuropathy in previously treated cancer patients, breast cancer and colorectal cancer patients who have survived their cancers but have this very, very severe and very chronic, sometimes for life, peripheral neuropathy. So it's nerve damage, nerve pain, tingling. There's a whole range of different symptoms of that. And those are our 2 primary programs that we're undertaking. I could give an entire talk on mechanism of action and science. I will spare you a lot of the details today, but the drug works via something called sphingolipid metabolism. And because of the way it modulates certain entities in the lysosome, in the cells of cancer cells, it actually can lead to apoptosis or cancer cell death and does so very selectively against tumor cells. And by virtue of the same modulation, what we found is also can prevent the development of CIPN and even reverse the symptoms of CIPN. We have a very strong patent portfolio. We've got issued patents through 2038 globally. So it's a global opportunity. We have other patents pending and others that will be submitted in a couple of years. And we foresee having exclusivity through 2050 on a global basis for this product. And on top of that, if you're familiar with the world of biologics, one does get a 12-year regulatory exclusivity for biologics as well for your first indication. So the FDA will grant that additional protection against generics. Our funding has been quite unique in that we have been very successful. We've raised now, as of today, $109 million to date over the years. That's included a little over $6 million in National Cancer Institute grants. And what's unique about it is that we do not have a VC on our cap table. We don't have an institutional or a VC in. This is a total regional story. So we've been funded by local hospitals. Cincinnati Children's is our #1 investor in the cap table. We have been funded by local corporations, big corporations in Cincinnati, who have VC arms. And otherwise, it's a number of family offices and high net worth individuals. So that's how we built the cap table. And raised $109 million to date. We currently have a $50 million Series C round that's open. We've closed on $42 million to date. So what we're focusing on right now is closing that round out. Our board has approved us going beyond that, it being oversubscribed. We will follow that on with ideally a final private round, institutional crossover round, and then we are planning to do an IPO next year. We're shooting for second quarter next year if the market is conducive to that. We know the market has been recovering slightly, but has been, of course, a little bit up and down in so doing. Just sharing a little bit about the science of the product. And again, there's a whole lot of detail I can go into here. So one of the reasons that the product has been shown to be such a safe product is that the active ingredient is actually a naturally occurring protein that actually occurs in every cell in your body in the lysosome. It's a lysosomal protein that we modify very, very slightly, a relatively small protein. And then we take this protein, and as you can see from the cartoon here, we actually envelop it or wrap it in a phospholipid bilayer. And what ends up through a very complex manufacturing process is you get to a nanovesicle or nanodisc, which is then lyophilized and then can be reconstituted and infused for infusion for injection into cancer patients at the time of administration. Because of the nature of the protein and the phospholipid bilayer, the product is quite fusogenic and specifically so to tumor cells. And so again, without getting into a lot of details, we're able to re-regulate sphingolipids, and two in particular called S1P and ceramide, that play a very big role in the ability of tumor cells to protect themselves against the body's natural immune system, defense system. We're able to rebalance that, and that sort of unleashes the body's immune system to attack the tumor cells, and it leads to apoptosis. And it's been known for many years and published extensively in various journals that if one raises ceramide in tumor cells, it does lead to apoptosis, tumor cell death in essence. So the value prop on this is that there's a great unmet need in colorectal cancer, especially metastatic, where treatment today is basically palliative. It's not a great prognosis if you're diagnosed as having metastatic colorectal cancer. And one of the big challenges are that there are some drugs which are fairly effective against the tumors, but they're very old medicines. And the leading one is one called oxaliplatin. It's part of a regimen called the FOLFOX regimen. And the drug does do a fairly effective job at shrinking tumors, but it also has a very, very severe side effect profile. And one of the big side effects it causes happens to be peripheral neuropathy or nerve damage in the periphery, hands and feet in particular. And so it's so severe for about half the patients who take it that they can only manage about a third of the course of therapy on the oxaliplatin. They can't tolerate it for as long as they ideally should, and they can't tolerate the dose. So there's a great need for products that can not only add to the benefit in attacking the tumors, but also when used in conjunction with standard of care, which is what oxaliplatin is, reduce the side effects so patients can tolerate it better and longer. And that's what we believe our drug does do. What I'm showing you now are results from the phase 1 study. We did two successful phase 1 studies. This one's the adult study. There was a pediatric study as well. What you're seeing is just a highlight here, but basically very, very safe profile of the product. Only one SAE in close to 1,100 doses. Again, an infused product. That was an infusion reaction, which is not unusual with infused products, but no organ toxicities, nothing to be concerned about on the safety side, which is maybe not surprising because this is indeed a naturally occurring protein. And then some initial hints at efficacy. And this is a monotherapy all-comers study. So there are 20 different types of tumors. And in this study, patients that came in, and these are very late-stage patients, many of whom were bound for hospice, if they didn't find some kind of way to stabilize their cancer growth. And what you're seeing here is time to progression or tumor growth from the last round of chemo. And then once the patient was put on our drug, which is called BXQ350, you can see that there's been quite an improvement in terms of the time to progression or tumor growth. So you're basically, in essence, prolonging the stabilization period and hopefully prolonging the lifespan of the patient. And these results were, you can see they were positive across various tumor types. This is glioblastoma. That's a form of brain cancer, very horrible form of brain cancer. This is colorectal cancer, CRC, and head and neck, and so on. Many of the patients in this study were actually GI cancer patients, and this is one of the reasons we chose colorectal cancer as the path forward. And so what this slide shows is that basically each one of these horizontal lines is a patient. It's called a swimmer chart. And when you get past this line, that's a pretty impressive result. This is maximum duration of response or stabilizing the tumor. So seemed like, if anything, the drug was most effective in addition to being very safe in colorectal cancer patients. So we chose to go ahead with them in our phase 1b, phase 2 study that we're doing right now. The finding that was rather surprising on this was that, and this is a report that came out of our site at the Ohio State University, which was our major site in the phase 1, is that, again, these patients, recall what I said about them being very late stage, very sick patients. So a lot of them had been on different types of chemo already and had pretty severe neuropathies coming in. In fact, 11 of them did. And out of the 11, 8 of them reported to us proactively that their symptoms of neuropathy were actually improved, and in some cases rather dramatically. And so this came back to us from the investigator. We were surprised. We didn't know that this was potentially an effect of our product. And it turns out that once we went back and sort of reverse engineered this whole neuropathy concept, we did indeed find that the product is able to protect and actually reverse nerve damage. What you're seeing here is nerve cells under a microscopic scan. This is a new technique that's used by a company called Ananda. If you add a typical chemotherapy, this is something called paclitaxel, which is used prolifically in breast cancer patients. You can see you're getting less prolific growth, less outgrowth in the nerves. And then if you put differing, increasing amounts of our drug, BXQ350, in, you can see greater proliferation in the nerve cells. So this is in vitro data. We've repeated that in vivo, in preclinical, and we're now doing a phase 1 study, as I said, in patients, proof of concept. I know my time's getting a little short here, so I wanted to share some, this is late breaking sort of data from our phase 1b, phase 2 study. And I could probably talk for about 15 minutes just on this one slide, but what this is showing is tumor response to the first line therapy that our drug is being used for in metastatic colorectal cancer patients. And so the green bars are the best responses. Any shrinkage in tumors over 30% is really viewed by the FDA and by clinicians as being very good. That's called a partial response. And we've actually got 8 of those so far out of the evaluable patients. And what might be even more impressive is that every patient but 1 has been categorized either as having stable disease, so some kind of shrinkage of tumor or not growth in this case, or a PR, pretty extensive growth, or shrinkage rather. And this study is ongoing, so we may get a few more PRs, and you may get even better results. We were hoping to get a complete response or 2 out of this if we can, and so we think these findings are quite impressive. And the other thing that I'll point out as I'm sort of wrapping up here with this data is, generally speaking, with standard of care, and recall I said it was a drug called oxaliplatin, we're being used in combination with that drug because it is standard of care. And very rarely do patients get over 6 cycles or doses of oxaliplatin. What we've been able to do with our protective feature against the neuropathy development is enable patients to get all the way to, in many cases, 12 doses or 12 cycles. And that is the recommended dose that if you get to, and there's been a lot published on this, your chances of increasing survival benefit is improved very greatly. And even more recent data showed these 2 patients actually have now hit the 12 cycle point. So I guess just to close it out, because I think I've exhausted my time here. So we have this data reading out, our milestone.
Scott, we have time for one question, and then we'll
Okay.
move the rest of this to the breakout room. So
All right,
plenty
let's
more
do it.
time to go through the rest of this with these guys. But Uli, what's your one question?
Hi. As far as the indication is concerned, are you going as 2 indications or just 1 indication with a beneficial side effect?
Yes, it would be 2 things. So we have 2 tracks. One is initially it's metastatic colorectal cancer, first line therapy with standard of care, huge market, huge unmet need, as you're probably aware. The other would be treatment of CIPN, chemo-induced peripheral neuropathy, totally different indication. And there's a chance that should we show favorable outcome from that study, the same mechanism could lend itself, we believe, to treating things like diabetic peripheral neuropathy and other types of neuropathies. So exactly 2 different approaches, same drug.
Is the
Great.
path to
Thanks.
regulatory approval for neuropathy easier than oncology?
It's actually a little tougher and most likely more expensive, although the trials are a little simpler to do, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because a peripheral neuropathy indication is probably going to be a chronic indication. So you'll have to do.
Oh, so you have to track
different
much
tox,
longer.
right?
Okay.
So that one may actually take longer. And if you show, as you might know, Mike, if you show favorable data in a cancer area like metastatic colorectal, there's a good
Right.
chance that the FDA lets you go directly to a pivotal study and kind of fast track it. So that's
Saves
probably
lives. Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we're at the end of our time here, guys, but we'll have Shane come up and move everybody into breakout rooms so we can continue this discussion. It's a great one as well. And then we'll have everyone else in a breakout room and you guys can get around to see each one as well. With that, let me pass it back over to Shane.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Scott, and thank you to all of our panelists and our companies today for taking time and coming into our event.